Okay, everybody, this is Kevin again. Today I'm going to show you on Pixelhue how to work and set up and run the P20. So I've launched the Pixelflow software, and I'm going to create a simulation of my P20. So I'm going to go to Simulation Devices. I'm going to create a new device by hitting the plus button, and I'm going to select the Pixelhue P20. There's, of course, the P20DS, which adds the SDI outputs and the Dante functionality, but for this video, I'm just going to do the standard P20. It's going to create and start my simulated device. Takes 10-ish seconds, and now I can double-click to dive into the system. So, if you watched my other video about the Q8, the workflow is very similar, but for those who did not, I will walk through it again. So here in the Pixelflow software, we're arranged into a couple different overall pages: device, screen, programming, multiviewer. On each page, we're broken down into 3 tabs. I like to call this the the resources panel, the visual programmer, and the properties. So once again, that is resources, visual programmer, properties. It's going to show you a graphical rendering of your system. As we're looking here, we have our inputs, we have our outputs, and everything's broken down with green connectors. Green indicates that the connector is active and a live source is coming into it. Obviously, on a live system, only the ones that are currently being used will show green. So there are a few different ways to view things in Pixelflow. So as we look at our Properties tab, this is a dynamic Properties tab. What that means is, as I select different elements, the properties is going to change. So if I select the actual P20 unit itself, I have the properties of the P20 unit. If I select the input card, I can select the parameters of the card. And if I select the input connector, I have the parameters of the connector. Now, the P20, or the P series in general, is very, very versatile and powerful, but can be a little tricky just based off the amount of capabilities that it has. So in order to make our lives easier, we are going to do a few things up front. At the very top of the page, we're going to go to Settings. From here, we're going to go to Preferences, and we're going to make sure that locked aspect ratio is enabled and screen resources is enabled. Lock aspect ratio is going to do just that. This is going to lock the aspect ratio of our layers as we build them. You could always disable this later, and we can always override this at the layer capability. The other really important one is screen resources. This is going to give us an actual count or a meter of our layer usage. We don't have unlimited layers. There are a limited number of layers, so having this enabled is very, very helpful. So here's how it works. On the input connectors, the ones that are HDMI or DisplayPort, you can use one of the connectors. So like input 1, for example, I can have it be DisplayPort or HDMI. You can only pick one. If you want to change this, you select the input card, you come over to the connector type, and you change whether it's DisplayPort or HDMI. I'm going to leave the capacity of 4K now because this is going to get really, really tricky down the road. So as I'm changing my inputs, I have a lot of fun things I can do for it. So I've selected the input connector. I want input 1 to be DisplayPort. If I select the DisplayPort connector, I can now look at the properties of this source. I can give it a name. I can call it Playback Pro, for example. And it's going to show me all the parameters of this source. The resolution, the frame rate, bit depth, chroma subsampling, etc., etc. I can turn the HDCP on this connector, and I can do what's called an info frame override. For example, if I want to force DCI P3, or if I want to force limited range, full range, 8-bit, 10-bit, 12-bit, I can do so here and kind of override what's coming in from the system. Most of that is already dictated by the EDID, but here you go. So now let's say I want to set a custom resolution. I can go to the EDID tab, and I can set an EDID for this connector. Pixelhue allows you to do up to 8192 by 8192 on any connector, except for SDI, of course. So we do have pre-built EDIDs here. We can go all the way up to 8192 by 1080. I hit apply, or I can do a custom resolution. To do a custom resolution, go to custom, and I could type in, I'll do 4000 by 2000, and I can select my refresh rate, hit apply, and I've now created the EDID for this connector. Now, if you're using an Apple computer as your playback source, which I would be here, you do want to make sure you enable compatibility mode. This is going to allow the EDID to properly communicate with the Apple computer and allow the Mac to actually work for this custom resolution. If you've done Apple computers, you know that it can be a pain in the butt. You might need to use SwitchResX, Better Display, an EDID generator, but with the compatibility mode, Pixelhue is usually able to accept just about any EDID with Apple. It works really, really well. Highly recommended. Now, if you're fancy, like Applebee's on a date night, you can go to advanced and you can type in your own parameters here. For the nerds in the room, our calculator on Pixelhue works currently at reduced blanking version 1. You are able to work at reduced blanking version 2, but you do need to import that EDID. Cool. Then we have effects. Effects will allow me to change the parameters of this connector. So if you want to change some contrast, some brightness, so on and so forth. Groovy. So now let's talk layers. The way Pixelhue works, well, actually, you know what? Let's come back to that because the outputs is really going to dictate it. So here we have our outputs. This kind of works the same way as the inputs. You can select the card, you can select the connector. Now, here's how it works. Think, while you have 4 outputs, really think of it as 2 output cards. Output card 1 is output 1 and 2. Output card 2 is output 3 and 4. So notice that when I select them, they kind of group together here. So Pixelhue P20 can process a maximum of 2 4K at 60 screens or 4 dual link screens or a combination of them. So I can have my first scaler basically be set in one way and my second be set another way. There are a lot of restrictions. So let's talk about it. So right now, if I'm in 4K capacity, what happens is all 4 of these outputs are going to become duplications of each other. So whatever outputs on output 1 will be duplicated on output 2, 3, and 4. These are not discrete. If I change my capacity to dual link, then I now have independent control of output 1 and output 2. I can now set these as different connectors. So notice output 1 and 2 are tied together. Output 3 and 4 are tied together. I can now do dual link resolution. So for example, 3840 1080 or 2560 1440, even 3840 2160 at 30. Now here's a catch. These 2 connectors must be the same resolution. I cannot do HD on one and 3840 1080 on the other one. These must be tied together. Now that said, this second bank can be a different resolution. So while I can do 4 dual link outputs, I really can only do 2 output resolutions. Allow me to demonstrate. So when I select the connector, of course, I have its basic connector outputs here. I can change the name. I can give it an output name. Timing is where I do the EDID and effect. Now you're going to notice I cannot change the EDID. Could anyone guess why? Why, Kevin? The reason why is because we actually already have screens that are being built. By default, the P20 builds screens for you. I want to undo that. So I'm going to go to my screen tab. And before I do anything crazy, I'm just going to delete screen number 1. I'm going to keep my auxes, but I'm going to delete screen number 1. Cool. So now on output 1, I can go to timing and I could set this to be any dual link resolution that I want. I'll just do HD. So I'm going to do 1920 1080. I'm going to hit apply. Now I changed output 1 and 2, but watch what happened to output 3. This is now 1920 1080. So let me show you how these are tied together. So remember, output 1 is 1920 1080. Output 3 1920 1080. So I'm going to change this to 2560 1080 and watch what happens. Output 1 changes back to 2560. So once again, while these are discrete outputs, I can do different screens. These are tied together with their resolution. Keep that in mind when you're building and programming out your show. So right now I have two HDs, and now I have output 3. I'm going to keep this one at 4K. Groovy. So let's build some screens. So I'm going to go to my screen tab. So once again, now I have output 1. I have 2 HD outputs plus a carbon copy. Output 3, I have a 4K and 3 carbon copies. I'm going to go to my screens tab now. So here's how it works. We have the aux screens built for you. These are done on these connectors here. You really cannot change the resolution much on these ones. They're basically HD screens. Let me confirm that. Well, I can change them a little bit, but they're basically single link connectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a new screen. I'm going to hit the plus button. I'm going to build screen number 1. Now I can pick a connector. I'm going to do my output 1-1, which is my HD connector. I'm going to place it here. And now I have my one output connector for this. Nice. I can give the screen a name. I'm going to call it house left projector. Groovy. Here I'm able to set test patterns. So if I want to turn test pattern on, I can do so. Of course, this only shows on the actual output. It won't show here in my GUI. I can do area of interest settings if I'm doing like an LED wall. Effects, color effects like we know. This is really nifty. So let's say I actually wanted this to be a different resolution. You don't need to go back to the device tab to do this. Even though the connector's been built with the screen, I can change the timing output here and change this to something else. So I don't need to dump back to the other screen to do that, which is really, really helpful. Now remember though, these two connectors are tied together. So if I change this connector, it's going to change this connector for me automatically. I still can also change my HDCP status. Advanced is where I can do what's called virtual pixels. Ooh, what is a virtual pixel? I can't really demonstrate it here too much, but this allows you to compensate for downstream scaling. For example, let's say I output 1920 1080 to an LED processor, but the LED processor is upscaled to 2200 by 1400. I can actually compensate for that in a certain way. It's tough. I'll make a separate video of that later that actually has an output screen for it. This is kind of a basic start. LCD bezel compensation, edge blending, all that good stuff. Cool. So I'm going to build a second screen now, and I'm going to build my house right projector. House right projector. I'm going to use my output 2-3, place it here, bada bing, bada boom. I'm now going to build a 4K LED screen in the center. So I'm going to call this center LED 4K. And I'm going to use my output 3-5, 3840, 2160. Groovy. So I've now built these, plus I have my aux screens, which I can use for DSMs and things of that nature. I'm going to now come to my programming screen, and I can make this all work. So you do want to make sure you have multiple select turned on. This is going to allow you to select multiple screen destinations. Cool. Now you're noticing one little element here. While I can have a lot of screens, in this scenario I have 8 screens, the Pixelhue software only currently allows you to view 4 of them at a time. So just do keep that in mind as you're working, as you do need to scroll left and right to view your appropriate screens. I'm able to minimize screens I'm not using by selecting the little tabs here at the top. Now note there's 2 ways I can select a screen. There's the eyeball, and then there's the actual screen name. The eyeball will just make it be visible here in my workspace. Then actually selecting the name of it is going to highlight it in blue, which arms it. Arming a screen means it's going to be taken with your next screen preset. Cool. So I'm just going to do my main 3 screens here. I don't know if I can move these around currently. It does not look like it. If anybody knows if I can rearrange these screens, just drop something in the comments. I'm sure I can. I just don't know how to do them, but that's okay. I'm going to leave it here as is. Cool. So here's how it works. Notice that it shows me my layers here in the lower left-hand corner. It says I have 0 of 12 layers. Where do you dictate your layers? Well, that's going to be done here in the device tab. We select the actual P20 itself, and here we have the layer type. 2 main layers, 10 pip layers, or 4 main layers, 4 pip layers. Here's where it gets tricky. You dictate the type of layers and where they're going to go. So these layers are system-wide. All the screens, except for AUXes, are going to share these layers. So what's the difference of a main layer versus a pip layer? A main layer allows you to apply effects to it, such as border, drop shadow, chroma key, luma key, smart key, cut and fill. A pip layer allows you to only change the size and position. So don't think of it as like a background and foreground. That's the wrong way of thinking about it. A main layer literally just means that you can apply an effect to it. A main layer can be in the foreground. It can be in the background. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to take one of my sources and I'm going to drop it onto my preview of my house left projector. And watch what happens. Notice that this is using 2 layers. The reason why is because the system defaults to dual link capability for your layers. So dual link is half the capacity of 4K. Because this is a 4K at 60 source, it needs 2 layers to work. So now I'm going to demonstrate a quirk of Pixelhue, and so you know how to work around this. Let's say I'm not doing 4K. Maybe I'm just doing HD. So I'm going to come back to my device tab. That was input 2. So I'm going to change my EDID to be HD, but watch what happens. So I'm going to change this to be 1920 1080. I'm going to hit apply. So this is now less than dual link. Thus, as a result, it should theoretically only take 1 layer, but let's watch what happens. So here we have my source 1920 1080. I'm going to drop it here on the screen, but note it's still taking 2 layers. Could anyone guess why? You are correct. The reason why is because I didn't make a very critical change. On my device tab, on the input card, while I made the connector HD resolution, I did not change the capacity from 4K. So even though the connector is only HD, it's utilizing and requiring 4K worth of capacity. Interesting. So what can I do? Well, what I can do is I can go to this input card and change the capacity to dual link. Okay. Now when I come to programming, it's only using 1 layer. Wow. So it's very, very critical that if you're doing HD or lower, that you take the time to make sure that it's actually set properly. I do notice that my EDID got messed up. Let me just change that. Very good. Perfect. So that's a very critical component. I cannot tell you how many people I've seen make that mistake. Now watch what happened here. See that I dropped a layer onto my house right projector? Remember, these layers are system-wide. So I'm now using 2 layers. As I'm working the layer though, just note that's kind of fun. I can move it around, I can resize it, I can hit this 1-to-1, and I can also hit fill entire screen on the layer. That's super, super useful. And now I'm going to build something on my 4K screen. I'm going to have a fill. Cool. When I'm happy with my look, if I want to take this from preview to program, I can hit take, and it moves it to program. One cool thing with Pixelhue is it is a A/B style switcher. So if I hit take again, it's going to move everything back to preview. I'm going to make this into a preset. I'm going to my preset tab, screen preset, save from preview, preset number 1, and here we go. Let's look at some other fun things we can do. This is a nifty one here I think you're going to like. So let's say I'm doing a pip like this, and I want to mirror this pip on the other side of the screen. I do have an option down here to copy. And if I'll scroll over here, mirror horizontal. If I hit copy, it's going to create another layer for me over here. Fun. Now, just keep in mind your layer counts here. Note that I am using 5 of my layers here, but I'm not using any main layers. So let's talk again about main layers and how that works. So a main layer is automatically applied when it needs to be. So for example, if I bring in a layer here, it's just using a layer resource. Now, if I come to the layer properties and I change something, let's say I do a border, it now instantly applies to a main layer. Doesn't matter if that layer is in the foreground or the background. So you can set each preset to have a different type of layer, but it's a lot to manage. So watch what happens when I do this again. Now let's see what happens if I try to do it one more time. Gives me an error. I'm out of main layers. So keep that in mind as you're building out your shows. A main layer is any layer that uses a type of effect. Yes, I know. This one's a tricky one. P20 is a tricky one. I personally think the Q series is much easier to operate. Cool. But yeah, we build our presets. Select the preset, recalls it, hit cut, hit take, build as many presets as you want. I think you could do 128, so quite a lot. And then we have our multiviewer. One important note on the multiviewer on the P series, you cannot move the inputs. Your sources are going to be fixed. You can change where they go, but you cannot physically move them. Cool. Let me just clear out my multiviewer. I can move my screens though. So what I can do now is I can place my program in preview. Let's do program, preview, program, preview. Actually, I'll move these over here. Can't overlap windows. Yes. And then I have my center LED preview and center LED program. Here, let me mess this up on purpose to show you what happens. So one little quirk with the multiviewer is it's very easy to break the aspect ratio. So let me do it here. Let me just move you out of the way. I just want to purposely break this. So this happens all the time. Easiest way to fix it, select this window, come to aspect ratio, and just hit original ratio. That'll put it back to its original. You might need to flip it between something like 1:1 original, and you're good to go. Beyond that, though, you can customize it however you want, and that's the show. So yeah, P20, it's super powerful, super versatile. There's a lot of tricky things. To recap, the big important ones you want to make sure. You want to make sure that your card, the actual input card, is set to the right capacity. Once again, if I'm doing an HD source, but my capacity is set to 4K, that's going to use twice as many layers as I want. Keep an eye then, of course, on your main layers versus pip layers. Make sure you have them set. And that's really all the quirks of it. There's, of course, more advanced workflows we can do, cut and fills, et cetera, keyframes, but we'll talk about those later. Beyond that, that should be more than enough to get you up and running on a P series. So rock and roll, have a great show, and talk to you later. Cheers.